Let's learn a little bit together. So here we go. This is the 16th chapter of Shoftim, the chapter of Shimshon. Before we start learning today, I want to thank our sponsors, to thank Leah and Arthur Kay. Where are the Kays? Oh, right over here. We just celebrated the birth of a first great-grandchild, a great-granddaughter born to their grandchildren, Yehuda and Safira Fuchs. Wow, what a stage in life. Emetz Hashem. The stage should continue and expand outwards. The Kay just moved into our community and have joined our shul in the last year, and it's been a pleasure to have you. Emetz Hashem, we continue to celebrate with you. Be'ezrat Hashem. We also want to thank Dina and Yaakov Shalev, who are sponsoring in honor of Dina's father's yahrzeit, Yaakov Chaim Ben Yitzchak Meir, Mr. Jacob Dome. He was a Jew who was born in Novidor, who fled to Warsaw at the outbreak of the war. He endured the confinement in the ghetto, forced labor, and after being deported in 1942, was sent by a cattle car to Treblinka. He lost contact with his entire family, and in the camp he survived just by finding trades. He became a shoemaker, a gardener. He witnessed the destruction of Jews under the cruelty of the SS, and he was transferred to a death camp, carrying corpses before slipping out to the living camp. He joined the prisoner conspiracy and smuggled weapons from the camp armory. Took place in the Treblinka uprising in August 2nd, 1943, and which broke out early after two boys were caught stealing bread and escaped through the breached fence, eventually surviving in hiding in the forest until the war's end. What an amazing thing. So when you say Good Shabbos to Dina, you're talking to a miracle. In every sense of the word. Emetz Hashem, there's much more. May his legacy, Be'ezrat Hashem, continue to be marbeh, Be'ezrat Hashem. Nishmasai Eden. Let us learn a little bit. So today is the end of the chapter. We're closing the chapter of Shimshon. It is a sad moment in Jewish history, but it is an intriguing topic nonetheless. And I would love to expand on it with you because it is really mind-blowing, no less than mind-blowing, what we're about to learn. So here we go. We remember we last left Shimshon. He's described as a judge of Israel for 20 years. Everything seems to be fine. He's been rejected by Yehuda, but nonetheless he kills all these Philistines with no less than a donkey's jawbone, and he's on the up and ready. But now comes along and he goes to Azata, and he goes to which what we call is Gaza. Gaza now is not the area, Gaza is the city. Gaza is one of the 5 city-states of the Philistines. It still is around today. In case you're wondering why it is called Aza in Tanakh and why it's called Gaza in English, that's because ayin is one of the guttural letters. So actually, technically speaking, it is pronounced Gaza, which is that's how the ayin is pronounced more specifically, which is then transliterated into Gaza. But that's the ayin is actually really a G. So that's that. Yes, Gemara, exactly. So that's the ayin in, and if you listen to some Sfaradim and to Teimanim, they have it a little more sensitively expressed. Be it as it may. Okay, so here we have the he goes to Gaza city, and he goes and he sees Vayar Sham Isha Zona, and he sees a woman of ill repute. Nobody over here interprets this as an innkeeper. Okay, so just to understand, there's no charitable explanation as to what's going on at this point in his life, and we have this curious description. Oh, thank you. That was the missing piece. That's why it's not working. So we have this curious description that La'azatayim Leimor. The Gaza people are told the following, that Shimshon is here, so they surround the city so that he's not able to leave. And so they're waiting to arrest him in the morning, but nonetheless, in the middle of the night, he gets up, and he goes to the gates of the city, and he takes the gates of the city, and he carries them all the way to Hebron. In case you're wondering how far that is, you can just sort of see, I just put it on the map over here. Gaza is really on the coast, right? So Gaza is really on the coast of Israel, and Hebron is in the center of Israel. We're talking about a significant distance, miles, tens of miles to get to where Hebron is. So he's carrying the gates of the city. This is what happens. So a few things over here. Why is he spending time with this lady of the night? And so, again, there's the Chazal don't sugarcoat this. Chazal say that in the name, the general topic of Shimshon is at the beginning of Sota in the Gemara, and the Gemara says in the name of Rebbe, Tchilas kilkuloi ba'aza, lefilkach laka ba'aza. He was his kilkul, we'll call it his wrongdoing is the way it's translated over here. His mistakes began in Gaza City, and therefore he ultimately found his fall in Gaza too. Which means to say, they're saying is this is as bad as it seems, and in fact that's what Abarbanel says. Abarbanel says, "Hayonimshach acharei tavasa." This wasn't a plan. This was a bad decision. This was a man acting upon his impulses. I would argue as well, it's the same language as beforehand. When he went to Timnah, Vayar Sham Isha, he sees a woman there. And he comes back to his parents and he says, I want to marry her. But now we're 20 years later, and he sees a woman again, but this time he doesn't have parents to temper it, right? It's later on, his parental oversight is diminishing, and he just does what he wants. And the sadness of this is the outcome. So he's with this woman, and the curious thing is that everybody finds out that he's there. How do they know he's there? So Radak says, he's a big guy. People know, they hear, they notice, they saw. But the Malbim says something much more sinister. The Malbim says, La'azatayim le'mord. It was said to the people of Gaza. What does that mean? The Malbim says in source 5, Hu atzmoi hotzi kol sheshimshon hu ba'ir. He was the one who let slip that he was there. Which means to say is that there's something afoot over here. It's almost, whether it's suicidal or whether it's conspiratorial, there's something, he's going in, he's not even hiding himself. He's telling people he wants this to happen. He wants there to be a issue afterwards, which will give us a little bit of a clue later on to understand the complexity of Shimshon himself. Let's go back to the gates for a second. Why is he taking the gates with him? So the most basic thing, as Abba now points out, is because the way they ensure that he's trapped is by locking the city gates. There's only one access point to the cities of old, and when those gates are locked, so what does he do? He simply takes the gates with him, right? So it's a symbol of not being trapped. Right? It's almost like your gates are going to move into Judea, right? But there's a lot that's said about city gates. In fact, when we were in Israel with the last time, we looked at many of the city gates together. Right, we were at the gates of Lachish. We went to the gates of Gezer. Right, we can see in Bezra Hashem when we go. Hopefully, we'll get to the gates of Gat, which is really important because Gat is one of the 5 cities of the Philistines. And we're talking about a massive city. I mean, the walls are extraordinarily thick. We have the ruins of Gat today, and you could go see it, right? And you can understand the Philistine culture because that was a Philistine, not an Israelite city. Technically speaking, it would be wonderful to go see the city of Gaza, but the only type of archaeological digging being done under the city of Gaza today does not involve finding out historical ruins. So unfortunately, we have to settle for Gat and Ekron, which is in Israel territory. But nonetheless, I mean, it's massive. We're talking about...
Findings, by the way, there were
yes.
findings of Gaza, the city, without the gates.
Oh, there you go. Wow, that's fascinating. There you go. Oh, that's amazing. So I would love to, again, there's so much of a treasure trove, so much happened in Gaza, unfortunately, nothing's really being discovered there, only destruction and death, because that's what they chose. But nonetheless, the gates of Gat, if I'm not mistaken, are 2.8 meters wide, so we're talking about a very significantly wide and heavy gate. We only have the posts today, meaning the stone posts. There was probably a wooden frame, and that wooden frame was probably what he takes with him. Chazal give like hyperbolic, and here, by the way, I just put in a picture of the frames of the gates of Gat. Okay, you can't. It's hard to see because it's not an aerial view, but those large pillars are the gate houses of the ancient city of Gat. You don't have the wall in this area, but they're massive, and the gates fit between those large those large were called stone edifices. The Gemara itself gives us a hyperbolic description of this. It describes that Shimshon Shishim Amahaya, because it says there was 60 amos, 60 cubits on just on the span of his back, because he takes the gates, and the gates are 60 amos. That's not true. The gates were not 60 amos. And he couldn't take those entire gates. It's a hyperbolic description of the strength, the sheer brute strength of Shimshon. Okay, so in this episode he escapes. They're embarrassed. This has not been a successful round for him. Okay,
Why does he take the gates all the way to Hebron? If he's just trying to get out, lift them, take them out, put them back outside and go to Hebron. You'll get there fast.
I've not found a good enough answer to that question, but I would argue is in a certain sense you're saying is your attempt to incarcerate me as an Israelite is as successful as your gates are now in Hebron, meaning I'm demonstrating your ability, your strength, your stronghold has been penetrated to such a degree that it's irrelevant. Your locks and doors are going to be relevant for the Israelites. Because remember, who's dominating today is the Philistines, not the Israelites. This is a symbol of their weakness at the time of their strength. I think that's what he's trying to do. Very, very fast. Now we get to the next and sad stage, which is as Leonard Cohen likes to talk about in the most famous song is Hallelujah. Right? This song is a mixture of Bathsheba and Delilah. In case you're wondering what he's doing, right? She cut his hair, right? That's referring to the Delilah piece in that song. Is now meet her. Now, technically speaking, her name is Delilah. That's really the better way to say it. But nonetheless, for English purposes, Delilah. So he meets the third recorded woman of the Philistines that he has a relationship with. And this one doesn't describe he sees her, it says he loves her. It sounds like he really falls for this woman. The other woman, perhaps he had a plan, he saw them, he lusted after them, but this woman, it sounds like he really loves. He finds her in Nach Sarek, her name is Delilah, and this time the Philistines do the same thing they did the first time around with the woman in Timnah, is they try to use her to leverage him, but this time they're not trying to win a bet, this time they're trying to kill him, right? Or actually, let me phrase, they're not trying to kill him. They're trying to neuter him, essentially. They're trying to take away his strength and torture him. So they come to her and they promise her a extraordinary amount of silver. They say to her, "We're going to give you 1,100 silver." Very strange number. It's not like $9.99. It's a strange number to be offering. We will explore this next time, because this number only appears one other time in Tanakh, and that's the next parak, in a completely different story. Okay, so we will let's put a hold on that number of money, because it's a very strange number. And they say to her, "We'll give you this very large sum of money if you find his strength." And they promise not to kill him. They just say, "Va'asarnuhu la'anoisai." We will tie him up to hurt him. Right? Right? Just torture, not death. And so she goes and she begs him. And she goes and she says, "Please tell me, how are you so strong? And how I can tie you up to torture you?" Which is a very strange kind of question. If your spouse asks you this is probably a red flag. Right? Yeah. Dina, yes?
Which makes me to believe that he didn't know where his strength was.
Okay, good. We haven't got there yet. We're just doing the story. But good. Let's analyze it in a second. Let's just get the pieces of the story straight. So the first thing he tells her, I highlighted in yellow, he tells her 4 things, right? So clearly he's wary, and he says, "Im ya'asruni b'shiva yasarim lachim asher lo charavu v'chalisi v'yisi ka'echad ha'aram." So he says, if you tie me up with these 7 fresh bowstrings that have never been dried, then I will be untouchable. I'll be vulnerable. She does this. She calls the Sarnei Pelishtim, the chieftains, and she says, "Pelishtim alecha Shimshon." He gets up and he just rips through the ropes. You think at this point in time, maybe he'd cotton on to the fact that she's up to no good, but no, she goes further and she says, "Why? You don't love me. You tell me how your strength is good. And he says the second time, tie me up with new ropes that are not being used, and then I will be like any regular person. She does the same things. She ties him up. She says, Pelishtim Shimshon, and everybody's waiting in the next room. He gets up, rips open the ropes as if they're thread. There's no problem. And she gets more upset. And she says, tell me, please tell me, don't lie to me. Right? Oh, isn't this a trusting relationship? Don't we have something special here with the Philistines in the next room? And it's really, the stories are remarkable. And he says, if you weave the 7 tears or the 7 locks of my hair in the loom, then I'll become like one of the people. And she does that. She calls him again, and he gets up and just destroys the entire loom. And she realizes, and this time she says, you tell me you love me, you don't really love me, you're not with me, you hate me, right? And the whole business. And finally, she tortures him, but and he wants to die, and he says, you know what, I'm not allowed to put any razor to my hair, because I'm a Nazir Elokim, I'm the Nazarite of God, from being better than me from birth. And if you take off my hair, that's when I will lose my strength. She realizes he's told him the truth this time. Many of the Pelishtim say it's because he mentions God's name. It's the first time he mentions God, Nazir Elokim. And so she calls the Philistines. She says, this time he told me his whole heart. And that's what she does. Is when he lies in her lap, she shaves off his hair. She calls him, the Philistines are upon you. He gets up like he tries to, and he can't. He's lost all his strength. And this is what happens. The Pelishtim capture him. They take out his eyes. They blind him. And they take him to Gaza, which is where ultimately they put him in prison. And they put him to Tochein Bebeis HaAsurim. He is now grinding in the prison, and he's sitting there in this thing. But the Tanakh does tell us is that while he's there for however long it is, months, years, his hair starts to sprout again. Okay, but that's our story for this point in time. So you just say, like, why is he falling for another Philistine woman? The Malbim says 3 words: Avera, Goreres, Avera. You have dug your grave. Meaning to say, if you live that kind of lifestyle, no matter how well-intended or whatever other conspiratorial plans you have, you are going to meet your match, right? I'm sure you've met people who are like, sometimes you meet people who are like complicated people who play games in deals and so on, and they swindle, God forbid, and you feel you're on the other end of that. Sometimes you tell yourself, it's like they're going to meet somebody who's not going to be happy when they do this to them. And it usually happens, right? So when somebody plays games, they meet their match. He has met his match right now, right? He has met, and it wasn't a man, it was a woman. None of the men of Gaza could take him down. One woman could. And this is Delilah. A few things to note over here. There's so much. This story has captured the imaginations of artists across the centuries. Most of the artwork you can't put in because it's not appropriately described, because there is called sexual innuendo of how Delilah takes advantage of him, which is what the Ralbag points out, is that the reason he gives in ultimately is she tortures him, right? And he gives in to her in the end of the day. What is interesting is you just, when you look at the story and you just say, what is going on here? How could he not see? How could he not see? So you could say, is that a woman can blind a man, right? A woman can blind a man in under such circumstances. You could say this, but I think there's something much more profound. And I came across in the book called The Perils of Possession, which is the Koren Magid series on Shoftim. Rabbi Michael Hatton has a really incredible insight, which I think is very, very worthwhile considering. And that is that if you think about the 4 times he gives her the message, right? There's the new ropes, the wet ropes, the loom on the hair, and the cutting the hair. They all are imagery of hair, of strands, right? Right? They're all imagery of strands. So you could say, well, what he's doing is he's giving her a close lie, right? But if you think about it from another perspective, maybe he wants to tell her all the time. maybe it's like he's trying to tell her the secret the whole time. And it's almost like he wants, in the same way that you suicidally entered the city of Gaza and told everybody, I'm here, right? He's suicidally trying to let her know. Why would he do this? So here's his argument. I think it is a very profound argument. Take a look over here in source 14. And I'm going to take you to page 7 within the second paragraph. 3 lines in, he says, but that very strength itself is a terrible existential weight, for it is placed upon Samson before his birth and became his self-fulfilling prophecy. In this light, the otherwise bizarre features of Samson's narrative can now be illuminated. Samson, chosen by God to rescue his people, burdened with a message of austerity and self-discipline, because that's the Naziros, devotion to God and a higher calling, chafes against his election. For what man can embrace a mission imposed with rigor? Thus he seeks out those who represent the antithesis of his calling, the Philistine sirens who promised him succor from the form of mindless living, descent into decadence and self-gratification and worship of pagan gods of wine and song, who ask nothing of their adherents except that they surrender their souls. Meaning that what he's struggling with is he never asked for this. He never became a Nazir. The Nazir in the Torah is a person who in self-reflection says, I need to do something to straighten my life. He never asked for this. He was a Nazir Mibeten. There's only one other person like this, and that's Shmuel. We'll come back to Shmuel later on, but no one else ever received this burden from birth. And in a certain sense, he's trying to struggle. He's struggling with this, and maybe he's letting her know is this almost this aspiration to break out of this Nazirus, break out of the blessing and the curse that comes with that. The blessing is his strength, the curse is the lifestyle that comes with it. It's like he's begging her to break him out. And if you think about that and scale that idea, isn't that what being Jewish is? Think about that for a second. The blessing and the challenge of being born into something you never chose. Right? There's something very profound about that. Rav Yitzhak Arama, in his commentary Akedas Yitzchak, who lived through the Spanish expulsion, wrote an entire essay on Parshas Nitzavim about this question. Is how is every Jewish child a child not by choice, but by birth? Like, what does it mean to be a child by birth, to be born into a religion that you didn't choose? And, by the way, you'll be tortured for it, but it'll give you the greatest opportunities in life. That's the struggle of Shimshon, in a certain sense, in a microcosm, and he's trying to break out. He's trying and doesn't serve him well, because ultimately, as he comes so close to the other side, he doesn't find love, support, companionship, and normal life, which is what he wants. Ka'achad ha'am. He wants to be like one of the people, right? But he can't. He's not able to escape it. There's a very profound, we'll call tragedy, in the identity crisis of Shimshon here, according to this perspective. This is one argument which I think is tremendously profound when it comes to this. Why is it that they blind him? Chazal already tell us, is we've seen enough how much he sees and where he puts his eyes. Unfortunately, every story begins with Vayar Isha. And so Chazal say a man who can't control where he looks will ultimately lose his eyes. There's a terrible prophetic justice in this process of Shimshon's loss of his eyesight. What was he doing in the prison? So the Radak says in those days that was the idea. It's like let's take advantage. The Nazis did the same thing, right? When they did the selection and they sent people to death, they sent people who were too young or too old to be useful for them. The rest of the people they used, right? And they basically just used them as slaves to quarry, to move, to build railways, to do all kinds of things for them. And that's what they're doing. Is like, well, use them to grind grain. A grindstone is essentially two stones. You can go in Israel and you see them. There's a base stone. There's a circular stone on the top which has a log inserted into it. And whether it's the donkey or the prisoner pushes that log around, and they place the grain in the center, and it grinds the grain. That's what he's essentially doing. I put a rendition of this picture over here. This is an 1863 from Karl Bloch of Samson, as a slave, just pushing the grindstone. However, Chazal say something quite different. Chazal say that they would bring. This is a euphemism because the Philistines would bring their wives to breed with Shimshon, essentially, like sort of treating him like a stallion, right? Like we know this guy's got something, there's some strength in him, so we want to use him to propagate more strong Philistines. And by the way, the Philistines love strength. Right? We're going to meet their champion later on. His name is Goliath. He comes from Gat. That's where he comes from. They love strength and brute strength, and they're trying to do this. The Radak rejects this and just says, look, he's weak now. There's nothing left. So why are they breeding him? Right? But nonetheless, Chazal see in this Tochein Beveis Asurin is a euphemism for using him. And in a certain sense, it's not because of their respect for him. It's because they're just trying to take his genes, right? They're trying to get like whatever we can do to get this. We now get to this sad point. So he's now left. Their savior's gone. He's in prison, and now they have this very great party. And this party seems to be celebrating their dominion over the Jews. We don't know if there's another. They're sacrificing to Zerach Gadol Dagon Elohehem. They're sacrificing to Dagon. This is their god. And they're having this whole feast, and they say, "Oh, let's bring out Samson to play in front of us." And they bring him out, and they make him play, and here's the man who was killing all of us, and he's blinded in chains, entertaining us, and they're laughing and they're drinking and they're eating. At this point in time, Shimshon turns to the boy who's been guiding him, because he's blind, he can't see what he's doing. He says, "Please bring me to the pillars of the building, because I should just get some rest on them." And then he turns to God, and this is the first time he really ever turns to God. Well, he did turn to God by this spring, but he says this very powerful prayer, and he says to Hashem, "Hashem Elokim, Zachreni na v'chazkeni na, remember me and strengthen me. Acha pamazeh, one more time, Ha'elokim. V'enakma v'nakamachas mishteinai v'plishtim. And let me get one vengeance for the blinding of my eyes from the Philistines." And God does grant him the request. He grabs the pillars and he pulls down the pillars, bringing down the entire building. The Tanakh tells us that over 3,000 Philistines die in the collapse of this large temple where they're celebrating. And he kills more people in this instant in his death, as he dies with the building collapsing upon him, than in his life. This is his last triumph. And ultimately, the nation of Israel, they send people in and they extract his remains from the building, and they bury him in the burial plots between Tzara and Eshtal, where his father is buried. And it ends off with a strange, enigmatic statement, V'hu shafat es Israel es Shimshon, he judged for 20 years, which might mean that after his death, he had this beyond death fear upon them. That because of the legends of it. The few basic things to notice is who is Dagon, just a really fascinating thing. The god of Dagon. Some say that Dagon refers to the grain god. Dagon in the Torah, in the Near East, in the Middle East, refers to grain, and it makes sense there. If you look at the fields around Gaza, beautiful fields. Gaza itself they haven't used. They only produce death and tunnels. But it's a beautiful area. So this is an area of great fertility. On the other hand, some actually connect it to to an image of this fish-like god, right? And later on, you will in Sefer Shmuel, they place the Aron in the temple of Dagon, and Dagon falls over. This is fish god, sort of half fish, half man. It's a symbol which some people attribute to, which makes sense because they are a seafaring nation. They did not come from Israel; they come from the Aegean Sea and near Greece, and so they certainly worship some sort of deity of the sea. Yeah.
Is it physically possible to take down a building with 2 pillars, 3,000 feet?
It's a good question. So we'll get to that in just a second. Actually, that's I found this great article in the Armstrong Institute of Biblical Archaeology by Christopher Eames. It's a Christian magazine, which is excellent. And this is actually they found that in Tel Kassil and in Gat, which are again Philistine cities, the following. There is some exciting archaeological support for the incident. Archaeologists have discovered that the temple plan of having 2 central supporting pillars was indeed a well-established Philistine architectural feature. While the biblical incident happened in the city of Gaza, temples of this layout have been found both in Gat and Tel Kassil. The pillars where they would have been close enough for a tall man to spread themselves between. This not only supports the biblical story, but also provides a support for the account of having been written when it says, rather than long afterwards, like some sort of imagined history. So apparently these are, we'll call it, there's different types of pillars. Like whenever you do work in your house, you say, can I take out this wall? And the contractor says, not that one, right? Right. So, meaning there's in our house, it's the center wall, right? All other walls you can, it doesn't really matter. But the center wall is called foundational. So those foundational walls, these are the foundational pillars. Apparently, now in the fire code in those days, they probably had a bad fire code to put it all there. But nonetheless, the central weight of this building rested on these two pillars, as he's able to do it. But these are, can you see over there? These are actually the pillars. I just put it over here in this picture of Tel Kasil. Those are a Philistine city. There are reachable pillars in the temple in Tel Kasil. Yes.
It's not unusual from a structural point of view
Oh.
to have a beam running between the pillars and cross beam going in the other direction. So if you remove the beam,
That supports everything.
Falls down.
Thank you. From our engineer. Thank you, professor and engineer. So I'm not going to get into the whole debate about suicide right now. Perhaps when we get to Shaul HaMelech, we'll talk about suicide and suicide at the hands of enemies. And this is a very complicated topic throughout Tanakh, and today, unfortunately, is in many situations. Soldiers falling upon the grenades to prevent their friends getting killed. These are very complicated topics. We're not going to get into that right now just because of time. But just a few other points. First of all is, why would Hashem do this for Shimshon? Meaning, Shimshon has demonstrated that right now there's a sort of abandonment of God. Why would God rejoin Shimshon? The Radak actually says, the Ralbag says in this case, says it wasn't for him. And he says that Shimshon was not worthy of this miracle, but who was? The Philistines were worthy of it. Why? Because they were gloating over conquering the God of Israel. Meaning, that's a Chilul Hashem. So the reason why this miracle was done was not for Shimshon, but for the nation of Israel, the standing of the God of Israel, which is what he was requesting. Very powerful idea is pivoting our prayers not for ourselves, but for the grander perspective.
That's Moshe's argument.
Exactly, it's beyond ourselves. And by the way, some people say that we come into the Yom Rime. I know I don't want to mention this right now, but some people say you can repunctuate the sentences. Put us in the book of life for you. Meaning, if it's about me, God says, I've got a lot of people asking me questions, a lot of requests. But if it's about you, I want to be part of this plan. That's ultimately, the Ralbag says, is what's happening over here.
But you
now,
the words achreini, which is
yes, you're right. So it is personal. And by the way, revenge is personal, right? But it could be that his request was such, but the response was against that. Meaning, that's the Ralbag is saying, Shimshon may have had personal intention, and there's something very sweet about revenge, right? But in the end of the day, he didn't feel that, right? So Hashem was doing something much broader than this.
It's a matter of perspective, He's asking for himself, but he's in the place of their God. So it's really a war between their
ideologies.
God.
You're right.
So, it's his perspective, but God's perspective is different, and the result is the same result.
The same result, yeah. By the way, about all of Tanakh, this question comes up is how much are they speaking for themselves, and how much are they speaking for somebody else, and for the broader good. And the two are closely intertwined. If you take out all the ich in any endeavor, you arrive at communism, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. People need to have a piece that they own. I want to take a look at this beautiful picture. This picture over here is a picture of Gustave Doré in his Bible, which is one of the illustrations of this episode. Why is this relevant? It's relevant because this particular picture has an interesting historical twist to it, and that is do you remember, if you've gone to the Russian compound in Jerusalem, the Russian compound is where the British had their prison in Old Jerusalem. There's a museum there today. In that museum, there's a very famous episode that happens with Meir Barzani and Moshe Barzani and Meir Feinstein. Who were these young men? So Meir Feinstein was an Irgun fighter. He was captured by the British after taking part in the Irgun operation to blow up the Jerusalem railway station. He was wounded, lost his hand in it, and he was sentenced to death. Moshe Barzani was a Lehi fighter. He was caught in the street after curfew with a grenade in his pocket. So this is the time when the British were, being even-handed. And the Lehi and the Irgun were more extreme than Haganah, and they were now there were revenge attacks happening at this point in time. Under these times, they were both captured, put into the Jerusalem prison, and they were sentenced to death. By the way, notice they did not, they didn't kill anybody, just in terms of and they were sentenced to death. Very famously, this is a whole story with the orange. What happens is they smuggled a grenade into the prison in an orange, right? And before they went to the gallows, you can see the gallows. It's in the Russian compound. Before they went to the gallows, they pulled the pin and they blew themselves up, not going to the British gallows. They killed themselves. Before they died, Moshe Barzani gave the English guard a man by the name of Thomas Goodwin. They gave him a Bible. They gave him the Gustav Doré's Bible, with the illustrated Bible, and they inscribed it the following inscription: to the English soldier, as you stand on watch, before we descend the gallows, accept this Tanakh as a memento, and remember that we stood with honor and marched with honor. It is better to die with a weapon in one's hands than to live with one's hands raised. That's the inscription he gave it to Thomas Goodwin. 60 years later, Thomas Goodwin's son fulfilled his father's dying wish to return this Tanakh to the family of the Barzanis. Right? This is under. You've seen it?
We were there. I saw it actually near Masikaram a few years ago, and we met Begin. Begin is buried right next to him.
Amazing. Yes, Begin asked to be buried next to these two boys.
We met his great nephew, I guess it was, at the grave. We didn't know who he was. We asked him to take a picture of us. And also he told us a story. He showed us the Bible.
Oh my goodness! So this Bible, this is historical material. It's amazing. I would love to have been there. So here's the thing: when the great nephew of the Barzani family received this Bible, they found out that it was the page that it was open to was page 45, which is this picture. Right, so meaning to say is that when they gave this Bible to the guard before they blew themselves up with that grenade hidden in the orange, it was open to the picture of this picture of Shimshon pushing the pillars open. So this wasn't just we're learning Nach. This is the way that they saw this in the same way. Notice one difference in the story is that they actually had a relationship with Thomas Goodwin, and they spared him by sending him off with the Tanakh. They did not kill their gods. Just to appreciate there's a slight difference in this. They were not out to murder people. There was a greater ideology. There's a lot to be said over here. Which brings us now to the end, and I just want to close this because this is as we close this this chapter, we have to ask ourselves is this a shofet? When we call this book Shoftim, judges, leaders, he seems anything but a shofet. Meaning, there's moral relationship. Here's the looseness with his relationship with women. All of them Philistine, right? And then there's also just like in terms of office, like where was his office exactly? Like the Judeans rejected him. They tied him up and gave him to the Philistines. Like what kind of leader are we talking about? Does this really operate in this way? So there's three perspectives I come across. One is the observation of Rav Yehuda Kiel. Rav Yehuda Kiel is the author in this volume of the Dat Mikra, which is really an excellent set, which took 40 years to produce. And his observation is, just to say it outside, is as follows: is every generation deserves the leaders it gets. And it's something worthwhile thinking. When we complain about how can we have such, foul-mouthed, immoral leaders, the answer is we are a foul-mouthed, immoral society. Right? Meaning to say, there's a mirror that stands looking at us as we talk about our leaders. And not everybody's like that. But a generation that is struggling with these things is going to produce a leader who struggles with these things. And there's something which is being said not about Shimshon, but it's being said about the generation. We are at the nadir, at the lowest point in the Shoftim. Shoftim, I mean, there's going to be worse. Worse is coming. But in terms of the leadership, this leadership is reflective of the generation. I think that's the worst thing to appreciate, right?
Yeah, Hashem doesn't want to help them. They asked us, and we said.
Yeah, So Hashem is giving them a leader commensurate to the people. I think that's is reflected in the text the most. But then if you come to the opposite extreme of understanding and you read the more spiritual perspectives about this, I mean, there's a lot of deeply spiritual stuff. In the Mechtav Meliyahu, Rav Delilah in his second volume has a long essay on this particular topic on Shimshon, and he makes a few observations which are worthwhile noting. And that is when Yaakov Avinu gives the blessing to his son Dan, he says, Dan yadid hamakachat shivtei Yisrael, yidan nachash alei ederech shivifon alei orach, hanoshach ika esos vayipol arachu achor. He compares him to this viper biting the horse, and the horse rider falls backwards. That's obviously an imagery of Shimshon. And then Yaakov Avinu concludes the blessing with Lishuascha kivis Hashem, in your salvation I hope, O God. The Midrash says that he's referring to Shimshon because he sees messianic potential in him. Meaning Yaakov Avinu is looking at this child in the future and saying, I see the Mashiach Hashem over here. And who else in Tanakh do you know who says, God, I need water, and God makes a spring? Right there. Meaning, like, we're not talking about somebody who's just, a sort of a forgotten, backwards person as well. We're talking about somebody who has incredible spiritual strength as well, which leads us to the actual tribe itself. Dan is the last tribe of Israel. He's called Ma'asef HaMachanot, the one who gathers. Rashi says, you know what that means? It means the lost and found department is found in Dan. Why? Because the guy who drops his watch, he's like, the tribe at the back is picking up all the lost objects, so he finds that. But the Mefarsh, like Chizkuni, says, no, it doesn't just mean that lost items fall there, it means lost people find their way there too. Meaning when people don't know where to go, and the complex, Dan is the place that absorbs complex people. That's like when we wouldn't invite that person in and so on. You want to find somebody who's gonna help this person who's in a Nebuch situation, who's got some. Dan was that space, which is complicated, which is why it also produces complicated people like Shlomit Bat Divri was a complicated person. Pesel Micha is going to be with the tribe of Dan later on. There's a lot of complications that relate to this, which is what leads Rav Delilah to say. And I mean, I'll read you his words in one of the paragraphs. But again, I don't understand it fully. But he says in the fourth line, the third line of the paragraph of Rav Delilah in source 30. Well, which means to say that he, even in his sins, was not controlled by the Yetzer Hara. Right? This is why he was so strong. In the darkest of places, he never lost his holiness. That's a pretty strong statement to make, which means to say is that we may view it as, him consorting with a woman of ill repute. The way it's being viewed from this perspective is a very holy person finding a way to extract the holiness of the shards in these very, very dark places. As he says it, is davar yachid b'minoi. This was the only time in history that this type of person went this way. This is a very dangerous argument because understand, the argument was made by another person in history by the name of Shabtai Tzvi. Shabtai Tzvi said the same thing. When the Ottoman Sultan said to him, you're too dangerous, you're too charismatic a person, you pretend to be the Messiah of the Jews, convert to Islam or die. It's a very simple, it's a binary decision, and he converts to Islam. What does he say? He says, he uses this Kabbalistic idea. I'm going into the dark to extract the light. And over 200 Jewish families converted to Islam, following him. It's a dangerous argument, which is why Rav Delilah is saying it's Yachid b'minoi. It only exists in this time. But he's saying, but don't make a mistake to view him as a womanizer. Don't make a mistake to view him as an immoral person. We're talking about a very holy person who's going into, like Dan, his tribe would go into the most complex of situations to extract or to save or to rehabilitate. That's what he was doing in Gaza. There was something in Gaza you need to understand. I don't understand what this means fully, but it's important to put this end of the spectrum in and not to just view it as the complexity on the other side, which is a leader of a corrupt generation. Now let's find the middle ground. I'm going to just close it, that's right, for this. Let's try to find the middle ground. I believe the truth is in the middle. It's not that he was so corrupt, and it's not that he was so holy. I believe that actually this is all intentional. This is what the Radak says. Remember how this all starts? He comes to his parents and he says, Mom, Dad, this is a girl, I really want to marry her. And they say, like, please marry an Israelite. And he's like, no, I want to marry her. He yashabeina. And they don't know, ki to'ana hu mevakesh. He's seeking out a complaint against them. That's really all this is. Think about this over here. Who rules the country? Philistines. Who is armed? The Philistines. So let's say you have this young, hot-blooded young man who says, I'm going to save everybody. And he goes out and he, blows up the railways. What's going to happen? They're going to come back and they're going to seek retribution. They're going to arrest him, kill his parents, kill his cousins, and take his neighbors into captivity. There's no way he can do this, right? He is so vulnerable. Israel's vulnerable. What does he need to do? He needs to create a mask. He needs to create some sort of, we'll call it, face of an individual that isn't even about Israel, so that Israel is safe. His family, his mom, his dad, his cousins, his neighbors, his nation are going to be safe. So what does he do? Says the Radak, he creates a elemental figure, this angry, vengeful vigilante who's seeking. You cheated me in the deal with my wife for 7 days. You remarried her. You killed her. Right? Every one of these things is revenge. Right? And that's what they say. That's why he's so convincing in his leadership that the people of Yehuda don't even accept him. They say, you're not one of us. And that's the point. He needed to be outside of Israel in order to be able to save Israel. It's such a profound concept, the concept of the masked vigilante. This is exactly what was created, and I always go back to this in Batman, Lahavdil, right? The reason why most superheroes have masks is because they are not just protecting their identity, but they're protecting their family. You understand meaning? If you're a Batman fan, there's so many comics that relate to this point. Is when he addresses as Bruce Wayne, the drug lords. They say to him, "You can't touch us. We'll kill your girlfriend next week." Right? Meaning you're so vulnerable, and therefore he puts on the mask, and being a nameless figure now allows him to do whatever he wants, and protecting those who stand behind him. That's what he does. He acts above the law. That's the vigilante. That's precisely, DC Comics did not, this was, is Marvel DC? Batman's DC is coming directly from this biblical story. He has created a mask of an identity, and therefore his leadership, his being a shofet, is completely different to the rest because of the state of military affairs. That's what's being created over here. Remarkable. Let's fast forward to today, and this question that was asked around Aviner just even a decade ago, which unfortunately to today becomes a story which plagues us. Here's the question that he's asked. When the Arabs attack us, are we allowed to retaliate? An eye for an eye. After all, attacking them and their property is the only thing that deters them. And likewise, when the army and the police evacuate settlements on the hilltop communities, perhaps we should have a react against the Arabs. Let them know that just as they've got crazies, so do we have crazies who can't be controlled. Insane, irrational people. This will deter them from creating a balance of terror. An efficient approach in this time. This time, the prophet Samson operated this way, and it worked. So they're saying, let's use the same methodology of Shimshon today. Right? Meaning the government is not stopping these the attacks fast enough. Let's speak to them directly, which means to say, let's say eye for an eye. You attack a community, we'll burn down your buildings, right? We'll kill your sheep, right? We're going to show you in the same way, and then when people say, how could it be? We'll say, it's extra governmental. It wasn't the police. We're just allowing our crazies out, like Shimshon is allowed as the crazies, right? This was the question that was asked. Rav Aviner responds, that is a very bad approach indeed. We do not build up the land of Israel through bad character and sins. Quite the contrary, because of our sins, we were exiled from our land. An important rule in Jewish law is this: one does not do a mitzvah through a sin. That's mitzvah bar ba'avera. In Shimshon's day as well, we did not have a country. And the Philistines ruled in Israel. So Shimshon operated alone. Part of his reasoning in doing so was to make sure that the entire Jewish people would not have been held accountable for his deeds. Besides, everything he did with divine intuition, in accordance with divine holiness. Indeed, the price tag against the Arabs, that's what this program is called, price tag, right? It's an eye for an eye. Some people have been moved on to price tag against the army and the police, meaning it's only a small step away from attacking the Jewish state itself, as though they are the enemy, and as though they must be treated as informers and traitors. So the complexity of this Shimshon dynamic is today the question, right? We can't trust the OCHA numbers, right? OCHA is this UN agency just focusing on the world's biggest problem, which is settler violence, right? But they count every time that a Jew is attacked and retaliates as we can't trust their numbers, right? They're completely off. But there are some people who are still doing this, meaning whether we like it or not, and the media is unfortunately can't be trusted, and they're not doing us a favor. Right? Because whether they want to be seen as extraterritorial, extra-governmental, they're not. They're seen as us. They're seen as me and you in the streets of New York as well. Which is, this complexity of the Shimshon model was a model which was, as Rav Avinier points out, in a stateless reality, when the only way to be able to do this was through vigilantism. But vigilantism has great, great costs. And the costs over here in Shimshon's life were personal, and in our generation, national, as we address this. We now close this incredible chapter, and we now have 2 remaining stories, but I just in terms